What's up, guys? Finally making some progress on the Rabbit. Went ahead and pulled the tranny. Slave cylinder was leaking and clutch was slipping. I'm sure they're related. Sad part was the slave cylinder was just like a year old. Genuine OEM metal slave was already leaking. So that's very depressing, but it happens, I guess. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean all this up, replace that again. Here's the clutch, BFI stage 2. Full disclosure though, this disc is not the original disc that came with it. This is an Exedi disc that happened to match the specifications as far as the diameter of the disc and the splines and all that. When I first had the BFI stage 2 in the Jetta, that was NA, it drove great. I love the way the clutch felt and it lasted quite a while. I think after a year and a half, the original disc failed. What failed on it was the springs in here were cracking and coming apart. Some of them were just rattling. One of them broke apart in enough spots where it came out of the cage itself and like ended up in the bottom of the bell housing. So this is the rest of the stage 2 kit just with an Exedi disc. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna get the flywheel cleaned up and resurfaced, and it really doesn't look too bad given how badly it was slipping. I think the slippage was more so happening between the disc and pressure plate, and I don't know, I kind of feel like it was because of the leaking slave. You know, the slave, the bearing meets against the front of the pressure plate, so if it's leaking a lot of fluid there, it could have got all over the pressure plate, making its way to the disc. And it does kind of seem evident. When I pulled the disc out, first off, there was a little lining of crust around the flywheel from the material coming off of it, and fluid in here that was making it all stick together. There was a lining of crust in here, around the edge. So, and as you can see here, it's just horrible. Anytime I was in like 4th or 5th gear and give it full throttle, it would just slip right away. So hopefully they can just take a little bit of material off of that and make it good. And I'm gonna go ahead and put a stage 3 pressure plate and disc from BFI in here. It's all already in my room. Besides that, I do have some other stuff to put in here. In the back of the Jetta, I have a subframe. So the subframe that's in the Rabbit now, well, sitting underneath it, it does have a 034 solid rubber subframe bushing, but the threads on top are stripped out. So yeah, what I noticed was in the other subframe where the bushing is, it looks like it's pressed into place completely on both sides, but the OEM bolt that goes in here wasn't coming all the way to the top. It was countersunk quite a bit and not grabbing on to as much threads as I would like. And it get torqued down pretty good. I think it's like 100 Newton meters, which is like 75 foot-pounds. And yeah, it just eventually ended up stripping out, so that was a big problem. I did drill it out, try to put a bigger bolt in there just for a band-aid, but it didn't last very long. So I'm going to clean everything up, put this subframe in there with new mount, new bolt. I'm going to see if the bolt's long enough on this one. If not, I'm just going to go to the hardware store and get one that's the same pitch and thread and get a longer extension. And then I also have a CTS Turbo subframe centering kit. So when the new bolts go in, it's going to center the subframe up and make the car drive a little better after an alignment, of course. Let's see what else. There's a few things I'm doing. I got a whole bunch of Diesel Geek Driveline stuff to put in. I'm not going to do all of it just because after talking to the owner, like I installed the ones that go under the shifter. The ones that connect the shift cables to the bottom of the shifter there, they're underneath the car. Kind of hard to get to. I could do it now because all I have to do really is move the exhaust a little bit and remove the tunnel, the heat shield under the car, and I can get to them. But mine feel fine, and apparently until they're really shot and totally effed up, it's kind of hard to get them off all the way to replace them and put new ones on. So I'm gonna skip that one for now. I'm gonna install everything else. Sorry if there's a whole bunch of background noise. I live right off of a main road. Shifter shaft bushings, which I'll show you what those are. I explained it in the last video that I uploaded, but if you didn't see it, shifter shaft bushings are gonna make it to where this goes up and down just as it does from new, because as they get old, those bushings that are in there on each side of the spring they deteriorate and they fall apart and they fall down into the base of the shifter, and then it gets stuck when you're trying to pull it back up out of reverse and stuff like that. I'm going to put the super pin on there, which is going to just take away a lot of play. And I'm going to do the new version of the Diesel Geek Sigma 6. So, well, I guess I could look at the tranny if I'm going to show you that. This one still has all the stock components on it. And of course, they're falling apart. But yeah, so I'm going to take these off and put the Diesel Geek Sigma 6 on there and adjust it all. I'm going to show you how to install that. And then I'm going to try to review a few of the things as well. By now I drove with a completely stock 2010 Jetta driveline, a completely stock 07 Rabbit driveline, minus the other transmission that was in it wasn't the original, but the driveline components are all the same. They're all original. And now I'm going to be, for the second time, driving on a bunch of Diesel Geek parts. But last time I didn't really, review any of them. I just kind of installed them and drove on with it. So I'm kind of excited about that. Let's see what else. Just some minor details that hardly worth mentioning. Basically, I need to get a longer coupler here. I need to shorten this one. The pipe that sits in here doesn't sit ideally. This is original C2 Motorsports turbo kit part. Well, as you can see, it's been modified. This is a funny little gauge. This just has the NPT fitting that fits the thread that was in here from the previous water meth injection system I removed. I never really used it. I didn't think it was that efficient, and I didn't feel like making it set up for making power, and I didn't think that just cooling down the air a little bit was really worth it, since I plan on upgrading the intercooler. So I uninstalled the whole kit and had a hole here, this little fitting. I was at my friend's house and he's like, hey, this fits. We threw it in there. So that's that. And of course I got an RKX diverter valve. Side note, if you're thinking about getting one of these diverter valves, just know that you're gonna have to modify it when you buy it. When I bought this one new, I like it. It works well. It sounds cool. It's hybrid. It can be completely closed off recirculating diverter valve, or it can be hybrid, which is, I forget, like 70-30 or 50-50. I kind of forget. You got like two different options there. But anyway, well, three options. However, this base right here, when you undo this hose, there's like three Torx or Allen bolts that hold this bottom base to the rest of it. It leaks out air from here. So I did a smoke test. That's how I found it. So I took it apart. I literally scuffed it up with some fine grit sandpaper and put some JB Weld along the surface, nice and thick. Put it back together, torqued the bolts down, cleaned up any excess that came out of here, and it was good to go. So just so you know, it's cheap, 60 bucks I think it was. It looks pretty decent. It sounds decent. It works good. Just if you want to get this, just know you got to fix that boost leak as soon as you buy it. So yeah, the reason that I was mentioning this pipe was, as it sits in here, this coupler here is very long. It goes down to the top of the side mount intercooler, and with the way everything fits, as you see, the coupler is one size and this pipe is expanding from 2.5 inch to 3 inch. So it only goes down so far, like right about there. So over here, it actually sits about there. Over here, it doesn't actually sit straight. It kind of sits like this. And that's why I had to get this type of coupler. So either I'm going to get a longer coupler, or I'm going to cut this back, or both. So if I cut this back, it will allow me to bring the pipe back further this way, and it'll bring off the angle. So just little details that I got to take care of while I'm swapping the clutch out and everything. Also, I should go over here. Brace yourselves. It's really dirty under this car. I have a bad oil leak. Really dirty. But I'm gonna get under here and show you something. So, there's the turbo. The bottom of the compressor housing, you see the fitting right there. That's to go up to the wastegate, so it can read how much pressure it's making and open the wastegate to bleed off pressure. The problem is with the transmission and where the axles are, the axle runs right into that fitting. So a normal straight barb fitting is what you would normally see on a turbo like this, where the hose would come off. it would go straight into the axle boot and just destroy everything and probably break the nipple off. So I went and I bought a 90, thinking it would work. Well, it wasn't enough, because even though it's a 90, it's got that big brass block at that 90-degree angle. And on top of that, I have a little hose clamp there. So it chewed into the inner CV joint anyway, tore it all to hell. So the only option I really have is to plug that back up with the original flush fitting, or flush Allen head bolt, or whatever you want to call it, and take that hose off and run it back to the intake manifold, which was not where it originally was. In fact, that hose from the turbo used to run all the way around the engine, all the way to the bottom of this pipe right there. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this guy. This is a air intake temperature sensor from like a Mark IV VR6 or Mark III VR6. It's something you have to modify and install in the charge pipe when you're using a ProMAF, which I'll be using soon. But yeah, so this nipple went from the turbo, or sorry, from the wastegate all the way to here to get the boost signal, which is right before the throttle body, and I just didn't think that was a very good design. So I ran it, instead of having like 5 feet or so of hose, I ran like 2 feet down to the turbo, but it chewed up the CV joint. So I'm gonna have to take that hose right there, and I'm gonna have to bring it over here to the intake manifold. And as you can see, all these are taken, these 3 fittings. So I'm gonna figure out which one I can use and kind of do a Y fitting and borrow some air there. One goes to the diverter valve, one goes to the brake booster, and the other one is I think it's evap with a check valve here so it doesn't pressurize the fuel system. So yeah, that's all I got for now. I'm hoping to get the flywheel resurfaced and back home. It's like Tuesday or something. It's Sunday right now, so the sooner they can get it done and back to me, I'm gonna start putting the car back together. We'll figure out what's going on with this BFI mount. Looks like it's broken. So as I drop the motor down to drop the transmission out, you have to drop it on the the driver's side. The engine has to drop down to clear the frame. So it pulled these bolts out of the holes. To me, it looks like they can just kind of slide back in, but I had a few guys suggest to me that it's broken. Basically not supposed to come out like that. So I'm talking to BFI right now. I sent them an email, see what they say about it. If they're willing to warranty it, cool. If not, we'll see. We'll cross that road when it gets here. That's all I got for now. So as soon as I get these parts back here, ready to go, I'm gonna film as much as I can installing everything. And so I'll probably put out a couple videos of that too, of the installs and a little review later on. And that's it. So see you guys soon enough.